Hello friends, welcome back to this fifth lecture on our course on consumer psychology. And so in the past four lectures what we have looked at is what is consumer behavior, and especially in the last two lectures what we looked at is the first process, two processes of the EKB model, which is the Engel, Kalat and Blackwell model. And so this EKB model is an important model. Why? Because it decides how a consumer makes actually an decision into the marketplace. So how it decides to buy a particular product and to get all the benefits from that particular product. So in the last two lectures we looked at how the need is aroused, how a consumer knows that he has a problem, knows that he has a particular need, and how does he address that need. So what are the factors, the psychological factors which actually make a consumer understand that he has a particular need, and then later on when the need has been aroused, what are the factors which may be it situational factors, be it his individual factors, all those factors which actually help him understand that he has a need for a particular product or he requires a particular product. Now after that, we in the last lecture we looked at how does this consumer, when he has a need for a particular product, he understands that a particular product is required, how does he go about and search for the information for this particular product. Now I should again make it very clear that consumers do not go through all the 5 processes of the EKB model, right? So all consumers do not go through all the 5 processes. Only those consumers who are actually very involved with a product, who actually are very interactive with a product, or those consumers who actually have a considerable amount of cost and risk at play of buying a particular product, go through the 5 steps of the EKB model. On the other hand, some consumers, when they are doing habitual buying or products which are low involvement products, they just go from the second step, which is basically the need arousal, to the last step, which is alternate evaluation, sometimes alternate evaluation, sometimes even not alternate evaluation, but choosing a product and then going through buying that, and then are they getting satisfied or dissatisfied. So basically our concern here is those products which are high involvement product, which follows all the 5 steps of the EKB model. So in the last lecture what we looked at is what does this search process entail. So we looked at 3 different kind of search process. We have something called the pre-purchase search, we have something called the post-purchase search, and something called the ongoing search, which is how the consumer actually expects or actually desires to get this information into the marketplace. And this information has been aptly put by the marketer into the marketplace for the consumer to gather this information, right? After that, we looked at there are 2 main categories of search, that is the internal and the external category, or external search and internal search, and then we evaluated a number of factors. We looked at a number of factors which influenced both the internal and the external phase. Pointers: internal search is that in which memory is the key component. So most people, most consumers who actually trust on internal search process are those who are experts in a field, or those who have some particular liking with a product, and so they have enough information, so they trust their memory for all the product related information into the field, into the marketplace. On the other hand, there are consumers who are novices and who have very little information about the product, so they go for external search, extensive, exhaustive external search. And so in the last class, in the last lecture, we looked at a number of variables, particularly 3 in nature. So we have situational factors which decide how external search is going to progress. We looked at consumer factors which decide how external search is going to progress, or whether an external search will be taken place or not. And then we also looked at something called consumer decision related processes, which actually desire or define how the external search is going to happen. There are also product related factors and some other factors which we discussed in the last class. So that is where we ended. So these are the first 2 steps of the EKB model. Now once a consumer has enough information about a product, so assuming that our typical consumer has a need aroused and that he has product information, what does he do? He goes for choosing the product, and that particular thing, before choosing, he has to do something called alternate evaluation, and that is the topic of interest of today's lecture is, which is alternate evaluation and choice. So let's take a scenario. we particularly have this person X who basically likes cameras, who wants to buy a particular camera because he's going for an upcoming trip, and so that is where the need is aroused, because he's going somewhere else, he's going to some place partying, or maybe some place on a holiday, and so he needs a camera to gather moments, to basically save his images or to save memories, right? And so that's the reason why he needs a camera, and so the need is aroused. Now once he has the need aroused, he desires for this camera, and so he searches for information to the marketplace. Now assume that this person X which we are talking about is a person who is highly involved with cameras. He likes images, he likes taking photos, he likes images, he likes a lot photography, and so basically he does a lot of search into the marketplace and gathers all the information about all the camera brands which are available. Now comes an important part of his search process, of his decision making process, and this process is called alternate evaluation. When he goes to the marketplace, he gathers a lot of information about cameras, all kind of cameras which are available. Now comes the process of alternate evaluation, and at times it has to be noted that with the search process itself, alternate evaluation happens. So what is alternate evaluation? How does consumers do alternate evaluation, and what is choice is what we'll be looking at in this particular section. Because in alternate evaluation, the consumer looks at all the number of products which are there, all the product benefits that it has to offer, and uses some kind of a mathematical model, or so uses some kind of a proposed schema through which he actually goes ahead and finalize a particular product. So we'll look into those in the upcoming lecture, in the next 2 or 3 lectures on alternate evaluation and choice. Right. So coming back to this lecture, this alternate evaluation and choice, and as we were talking that this is the 4th step into the AKB model. So let's look at what is alternate evaluation. Let's look at some primary definition of what alternate evaluation is. And so as I discussed, this is basically choosing among a number of products which offers the same benefit to the marketplace. So the process through which compare and contrast different solutions to the same marketplace problem is actually called alternate evaluation. So in the marketplace, when we go into the marketplace, there's a number of products which is offering you all the benefits that you are desiring of a product, and when the process through which you compare among those and select the ones which comes into your consideration set. Remember consideration set from the last lecture. We'll also do this here. Consideration set is a memory set for people which consists of products which come to the front of their mind. So the process through which people can construct this consideration set is called the alternate evaluation process. So this alternate evaluation, it can happen on a number of levels, right? And let's take this simple example in which let's say there is a person Y who is out of coffee, and so how does the alternate evaluation really goes ahead and takes place? So this person has Y is basically a person who likes a particular brand of coffee, and so let's say a cappuccino maybe, or black coffee. And so what he does is when next time he comes home and he finds that there is a need arousal in terms of the coffee is not there, so one of the things that he can do is actually go into the marketplace and buy the same brand of coffee that he has been drinking, the same brand of black coffee that he has been drinking. And so in this cases, this particular act of going into the marketplace and buying a particular brand of coffee which he has already been drinking is something called habitual buying, and so in this particular case there is no alternate evaluation. And as I said, there are times in which the consumer actually doesn't do this whole alternate evaluation. But imagine that this person goes into the market, the person Y goes into the market and he is looking for his usual brand of coffee, and then he later realizes that there are other brands, other types of coffee which are available within his own brand. And so there is mochaccino, there is cappuccino, there is some other latte brand, and some other forms of coffee which are available. Now he is already stuck to his own specific taste of coffee, which is black coffee. But since there are other things which are available, there are other products which are available, there are other tastes which are available from the same brand of coffee, and what he does is he can do an alternate evaluation and switch his brand, right? Switch his taste. So he can move from let's say that he decides that I'm no longer interested in black coffee, let's go for a latte, or let's go for a cappuccino. And so this is called within brand or within category movement or within category alternate evaluation. There can be another situation where this person goes in and buys a different product altogether, a different type of product altogether, a different brand of coffee altogether. What he can do is, in one case, what he can do is within his own brand, he can go for different tastes, or what he could do is find some other brand. So maybe he likes Nescafe and then he is going for some other brand of coffee, let's say Sunrise or Tata or whatever it is, and so he may go from one brand to another brand, and this is also called, this is another process of alternate evaluation where the person is doing, the consumer is doing something called product switching. There can also be another thing that can happen here, and that is where the consumer moves from his brand to another taste altogether. He moves class, he moves category. So the consumer likes coffee, he's out of coffee, goes into the market to buy coffee, and suddenly realizes that he doesn't like coffee that much. He likes hot chocolate. And in this case, what happens is, when he goes to the market next time, he is not looking for coffee, he is not looking for different tastes of coffee, he is not looking for different brands of coffee. What he does is a switch of different categories, a switch of different class. And so what he does now is he somehow finds out that hot chocolate is much better, it's more healthier, it's more enjoying, and so on and so forth, and so he does this category transformation, or he does this alternate evaluation and finds a different product altogether. So there are two to four different ways in which the consumer can actually go ahead and do this alternate evaluation. And how does he do that? He does all this process through all the materials, all the informations that he has collected through the search process. So usually this alternate evaluation, it occurs simultaneously with information searching, and it involves comparing different products, services, retail outlets, and brands. So as I said, this brand switch, I'm sorry, not brand switching, this alternate evaluation may happen through at the process of the search itself. So when you are collecting information through the search, when you are collecting information in the external search process or internal search process, at that point itself, this alternate evaluation can happen. And this alternate evaluation can happen for products, it can happen between different kinds of products. For example, switching from one coffee to another coffee. It can happen while switching from services. So you like the service of a particular airline, now you don't like the service anymore, it's not that lucrative, so you move from one service to another, you move from one postal department to another, one kind of postage system to another postage system, one courier to another, and this is service shift. Or you can do a shift in retail outlets. So you find out there is a particular retail outlet that you used to go, it's very lucrative, it's very important, and for you it's very appealing for you, and suddenly you find that this retail outlet doesn't have much to offer, and so you shift this retail outlet, and that is called alternate evaluation. You look at the number of outlet, you either change or you don't change. And then within brands also. So the alternate evaluation can also happen between different brands when we are comparing different brands. So be it within brand comparison, be it within product comparison, be it different class comparison, or different category comparison. And so this alternate evaluation, as I said before, it doesn't happen in one case. In one particular case, this alternate evaluation doesn't happen. When this doesn't happen? When the product is actually habitual buying, where the person who's buying this product skips evaluation. Why? Because habitual buying is a low involvement trick, and so people who do this habitual buying, they are not very involved in this product, and so they just go ahead and buy the product because they believe that the product is actually satisfying their need, and so there is no need for alternate evaluation, right? And so in those cases, what happens is the subject goes ahead and does habitual buying. So consumer benefit and evaluative criteria. So basically, the consumer, when he is doing alternate evaluation, the reason why he is doing alternate evaluation is basically he is comparing benefits. Now remember the tagline that I have been using all along on all those lectures, and the tagline is that people don't buy products. What they buy is product benefits, whatever benefits comes out of products, because it is benefits that they are interested in. And so what we look into is how people look for, or what are the ways in which people does this alternate evaluation. So what are the criterias, right? And so basically the criteria revolve around product benefits, consumer benefits. So consumers are looking for benefits into the market, and that is why they do the alternate evaluation. So the very reason why a consumer actually does an alternate evaluation is looking at benefits, getting benefits. So some products offer them more benefits, some don't, and that is why they switch. And so the whole idea of consumer going to the market, searching for information, doing alternate evaluation is actually looking for maximum benefit at minimum cost and minimum risk. So how does the consumer do these alternate evaluation, and what is the criteria that they have? Now from the last lecture, if you would remember, we looked into something called memory set criteria for minimizing the number of brands that is available to you. So consumers actually use a method through which they minimize the number of brands which are available, the number of brands which are available to you or that you remember, and for that they create something called mental sets. Now what is a mental set? Think of mental set as a memory process. It's a memory process, or it is a mental bin in which the consumer keeps all the information which he collects from the in marketplace about product information. So there is a lot of product information in the market, and the consumer, when he goes there, he collects a lot of product information. And so there are three different kinds of product sets which are there, this memory bins which are there in memory. One is called the universal set. Now in the universal set, what comes in is all those products and all those product benefits that exist in this world, and so the consumer may not be aware of it, but that is what the universal set is. So the universal set is that set which consists of all those products that the consumer is looking for and all the benefits that he's looking for, but the consumer may or may not have an access to that set. This is called the universal set. Now there is something called the retrieval set. Now what is the retrieval set? That is that bin of memory which is within the consumer that has all the products and product benefits that the consumer is looking for, and he can remember, that comes to his mind, that he can have access to. So that is what is the number of products which are out there. And similarly, there is a third bin which is called the consideration set. That is that set, that is that particular memory bin which the consumer actually utilizes to buy a product. So there may be a number of products that the consumer may be aware of, a number of benefits that the consumer may be aware of, but the buying decision is different from remembering decision, and that is the reason why the consideration set is a different thing. So what consideration set is? It's another kind of set, is a subset of the universal set or the retrieval set, which has only those products and product benefits that the consumer actually uses to make the final purchase or make the final choice. So consideration set, why does the consideration set, why need of consideration set? The consideration set reduces the number of alternatives to manageable size. And so what consumers actually do, one of the evaluative criteria that consumer actually use is the formation of consideration sets. So these consideration sets minimizes the number of alternatives, because what consumers tend to do is they only remember those products and product benefits which actually matter for them. Now consumer they create consideration sets of heterogeneous alternatives when. Now consumers can create two kinds of consideration sets. They can create a homogeneous consideration set, and they can create a heterogeneous consideration set. And so in the homogeneous consideration set, the idea is that all products which are of similar type, similar benefits, that is a homogeneous consideration set. But a consumer creates a heterogeneous consideration set, and a heterogeneous consideration set is more important. Why? Because the more heterogeneous a consideration set is, the more available choices will be, the more distinct products will be. Now if I am looking for a camera, and if my consideration set is something which is equivalent to a Nikon, or which looks alike to a Nikon, then the number of products that I am looking at, or the number of brands that I am looking at, will be similar, right? But when I am looking for a camera and I'm looking for different kinds of brands. So on one end I'm looking at Nikon, on the other end I'm looking at Casio, on the other end I'm looking at Canon, and I'm looking at some other brand which somebody has heard about, and all of them vary among each other. So they form a heterogeneous group, and so there I'll have more number of choice. So consumers generally form a heterogeneous consideration set of heterogeneous alternatives in the consideration set when they do it when they don't want to miss a viable choice. As I said, what happens is if you have a consideration set of like-minded items, what would happen is that chances are that a viable choice of product would get missed out of it. And so what the consumer actually does is he creates a consideration set where a number of options are available, a number of viable options are available. They see some common benefits to make comparisons easier. Now they consider this, or they make this consideration set, they make this heterogeneous consideration set when they find a common benefit which is among which they require from all the products, and based on that they make the comparison. And different groups of potential choices offer a benefit. So they do this heterogeneous consideration set when there is some of benefit trade-off. So when they have a number of products in their consideration set and all of them are different, what they can look at is if A product is offering me some benefit and B product is offering me some other benefit, then what I can do is I can weight whether A is more important to me and B, and that will make my life easier, that will make my choice easier, that will make my decision process easier. And so that's what is called the benefit trade-off. So one product offers some benefit to you, the other product doesn't offer that level of benefit but gives you some other benefit which is a higher weight for you, in the sense that it is more desirable to you, and so you make this trade-off and then you might make this consideration set. So heterogeneous consideration set is actually very good, and so when does the consumer do that? He does that in any of these circumstances, in any of these situations. So as I said, there are two types of consumer sets. One is which is made up of all alternatives to which the consumer has reasonable access, whether he or she is not aware of it, and then a retrieval set is a subset that consumers bring upon to memory. We have discussed this, so no need to go back into this. And the objective for marketer is to make sure. So what is the marketer actually interested in? The marketer is actually interested in is putting his product with product benefits into a consumer's retrieval set, right? Retrieval set or more importantly into his consideration set. Now when I say putting a product into his consideration set, this is entirely not possible. The reason being that a consideration set is basically a subset of the retrieval set. So what the best a marketer can do is put a product into a retrieval set, which basically means that he can make sure that the consumer remembers it. But whether the consumer selects this particular product into his evaluative criteria, into this alternate evaluation process, is something which is dependent on the consumer, and the marketer has no share into it. So what the best thing that the marketer can do is bring a product or advertise a product in such a way, position a product in such a way, or define the benefit of a product in such a way that it gets remembered better by the consumer, and so it makes a part of the retrieval set. And that is what it says. The objective of the marketer is to make sure that the products, services, outlets or brands are part of the retrieval set, and then remembered when it comes when the time for buying it is out there. So that's one of the aims of any marketer, and so this is how there are two type of consumer sets which are there. What is the evaluative criteria? Now as I said, the alternate evaluation is based on certain evaluative criteria which are very dear to the consumer. So consumer uses some kind of evaluative criteria to do this kind of the alternate evaluation. So what are these evaluative criteria? The means through which consumers compare product, classes, brands, vendors, and so on and so forth are evaluative criteria. These are those characteristics which the consumer picks up from any brand. These are those benefits which the consumer picks up from any brand through their consideration set, put into the consideration set, and then decide what to buy and what to not. So these are those characteristics. These are those comparison standards which the consumer uses to make this decision of what brands to pick up from your retrieval set into the consideration set, what brands to pick up for doing this alternate evaluation. So what are these criteria? One is tangible benefit. One criteria that the consumer actually uses is something called tangible benefits. So tangible benefits are associated with such characteristics as price, color, size, shape, and performance. Any product has two kinds of benefits, and that we saw in the first lecture itself when we were looking at different kinds of brands and what are the benefits of a particular brand, right? And so we looked at there is in the core product description, we looked at there are two benefits from any product. One is called the tangible benefit, the other is called the intangible benefit. So intangible benefit is that which you can touch. Tangible benefit is that which you can evaluate, through the physical senses. And so some of these tangible benefits which form or which are prescribed as an evaluative criteria or which are prescribed as a standard for doing this set consideration, a standard for doing alternate evaluation, is the tangible benefits. And these tangible benefits or these tangible criteria are price. You can do a price comparison, you can do a color comparison, you can do a size comparison, a shape comparison, performance comparison, anything which you can touch and feel. And so consumers use tangible benefits as a marker, as a standard for doing alternate evaluation. And the other criteria that the consumers can use are called intangible benefits. So what are intangible benefits? Consumers perceived image of a particular product, and he looks at whether this consumer's perceived image matches the image of the brand use or other feelings associated with the ownership of the brand. Now, intangible benefits are those benefits which the consumer cannot actually go ahead and touch, and so these are feeling related things, these are psychological benefits, these are in the psychological ring. And so intangible benefits are those benefits which the consumer actually gets or uses when using as an evaluative criteria in an alternate evaluation. These benefits are those benefits which are similar to the prestige that you get by using a particular product or the feeling that gets associated with you when you buy a particular product. And that is why you see so many people using Apple, because the product, the sign of the Apple gives you that prestige. Or using an Audi, if you use an Audi, that car gives you that particular kind of a prestige, that particular kind of a social standing, and that is something which is important to consumers, right? There's an aesthetic property, a psychological property, and one of the evaluative criteria, one of the standards that the consumer actually looks at for making alternate evaluation is the intangible benefit, is the feeling associated with it. And so there are two different kinds of benefits the consumer is actually looking at. So we've discussed two different criteria which are there, right? Intangible and tangible. Within that, there are a number of criteria which are there. So the question is, how many criteria should a consumer actually look forward for? How many criteria should a consumer be focusing on? And the general rule of thumb is that there are 6 consideration criteria that most consumers actually use for doing alternate evaluation, and that is what I have put up. Consumers typically use 6 or fewer evaluative criteria. Question: why 6? Now, if you remember, the basic of psychology, the psychology of memory, says that there is something called short-term memory, and the short-term memory has a capacity of 7 plus or minus 2 items. And so this 7 plus or minus 2 varies from 5 to 9 items, and that is one reason that the short-term memory, the human memory, can take 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of items. So 7 is the most that it can take, and so 1 minus that, or within that range, is 6 items. And that is one reason that the memory at any point of time can actually look at 6 items at the most. That's what science suggests, that's what psychology suggests, and that is why a 6 criteria limit has been set. So typically most consumers actually use 6 evaluative criteria, but that is not a rule. Consumers also use a number of criteria, sometimes use more criteria. So the more important the consumer considers the purchase, and the more experience he or she has with the product category, the greater the number of evaluative criteria. So as the consumer thinks about a particular product to be more important, as he starts believing that a particular product is more important to him, that it is more dear to him, and as he gets more experience with a particular product, the more experience he starts getting with a particular product, the more number of evaluative criteria is there. But remember, the more the number of evaluative criteria, the more difficult the decision process. The lesser the number of evaluative criteria, the better the decision process. So evaluative criteria are often used in combination, making it difficult to understand the influence of each of the consumer's choice. So what happens is, this evaluative criteria that the consumers actually use for buying a product is not very specific, saying that only A and B are there. There is a there is amalgamation of number of evaluative criteria, and at times it becomes really difficult to find out which evaluative criteria has been used. And that is why I have put up saying that the consumers use a number of criteria, a number of combination of evaluative criteria. So sometimes it is the price which is of importance to you. At other times it is the experience which is important to you. So let's talk about an example. Let's say somebody is interested in buying a car, and so this particular evaluative criteria also depend upon your particular need. Let's say there are two people, A and B, and A wants to buy a car. Now A wants to buy a car. Why? Because he thinks of the car as a means of transport from getting from A to B, and for him the evaluative criteria will be different, or it will the number of criteria that will be used is entirely different, because what he'll focus on is that how good is the car engine, how less is the service, how big is the trunk, how efficient is the car, and so on and so forth, because his benefits that he is sorting from the same car is moving as a means of transportation. On the other hand is my guy B, who actually has the car and he wants to keep the car as a prestige symbol, and so for him it's not only just how efficient is the engine, it is the color of the car, the design of the car, and so many other things which are there. And so as I said, while making a purchase, there is a number of criteria that people use, a number of combination of criteria that people use, and it becomes really difficult to find out what influences what. And that is one important thing to watch out for most manufacturers and most consumers. What happens is, if you are putting a product out there and if you are putting a number of features onto a product, the consumers actually become confused. Surprising? Yes, it is. The more number of features you actually put into a product, the more confused the consumer gets. He doesn't get to decide what to use and what not to use. All of them confuses him a lot, and so it is always a wise suggestion to use to minimum number of criteria, minimum number of evaluative criteria, because the more number of features that you put into a particular product, it creates a feature fatigue. So think about a phone which can do a lot of things. It can turn on your TV, it can make you do calls, it can make a video call, it can do music, it can do movies, it can do photography, it can do so many other things. The more number of benefits that you offer in a phone, the more the consumer gets confused, right? Because the core aspect of the phone is calling, and so the more number of features you are putting in, the more number of comparison sets increases, the more number of products increases, the more number of benefits that he's sorting out increases, and so he becomes confused. And so this is a term which has been put into the market or in marketing research, and that is feature fatigue. So it is always advisable to limit the number of features that you put into a product, so that the consumer can actually go ahead and look at what features that he wants and do a better job at finding or evaluating a product. The more important decision is to the consumer, the fewer acceptable alternatives there are. And in this case, what really happens is, important a decision is, the more imminent a thing is, the more acceptable, more desirable a product is, the fewer alternative criteria the consumer uses, and that's one important thing. So more acceptable alternatives become lesser and lesser as the product becomes more and more dearer to him. The number of criteria, the acceptable criteria, acceptable alternatives become lesser and less, because the criteria for selection becomes stringent, becomes lower. Now the salience of an evaluative criteria. Is salience of an evaluative criteria? So salience is the relative importance of a evaluative criteria. What importance does a relative evaluative criteria has? Now marketers determine the salience of each evaluative criteria and identify those characteristics most likely to influence the target consumers. Now suppose, let's say there is a product out there. Now the product would have a number of benefits which are there, but what the consumer tends to do is find out those product benefits which are going to appeal, which are the most important relative importance, which has the most highest relative importance to a consumer. For example, any product, let's look at a car. Now if I'm looking at a car, there are a number of benefits the car can offer to us. For example, it can give you it's a vehicle, so it can take you from point A to B. It can be a status symbol which is non tangible. It has a price, color, design. It offers you all the comforts of a house. It can offer you a number of things. But the idea here is that what the manufacturer does is actually looks at the salient criterias, or he underlines all those salient criterias. And so saliency of a criteria is important, because if a marketer understands, what are the salient criteria, what is it the consumer is looking at, and if I can highlight the critical criteria of a particular car and put it into the market, then the chances of selling it will be higher. And that is why you see that several brands which are out there, or several companies which are out there, they put brands with different criteria. And that is why Maruti has an Alto K10 or Alto 800, a car which is the most economical car. On the other hand, it has a Ciaz or a Baleno, which is on the other end, which is a more premium car. So there they don't promise the fact that it is going to be mode of transportation. They are promising you prestige, they are promising you comfort. On the other hand, 800 promises you more mileage out of the vehicle, so lesser space, more mileage, and so on and so forth. So basically what the marketer does here is that he highlights the salient feature, the product feature which is the highest importance, of highest relative importance to the consumer. And why does he do that? Because saliency will actually help a consumer decide something called determinant criteria, right? So when in the process of alternate evaluation, what the consumer is actually looking at is what all benefits that I can get from the retrieval set, what all benefits that I can get from the particular product. So he is looking at all those benefits which are there. Now if the marketer can highlight those benefits which matches what the consumer is looking at, what the consumer need is, it is very easy for the consumer to then determine or make this criteria as a determinant criteria. So saliency varies from consumer to consumer, product to product, and situation to situation. Yes, that's an interesting thing. This idea of saliency, it varies from different people, from product to product, and situation to situation. How the same consumer, as I explained a moment ago, for two people, one who is looking at a car for transportation and another looking at a car as a social symbol, for them saliency would be different, because saliency of criteria that I am looking at, or saliency, product attribute saliency that I am looking at here in case 1, where a person is looking at a mode of transportation, of the car as a mode of transportation, for him the salient criteria is how much mileage is the car churning out, and so he is interested in mileages. On the other hand, the person is looking at the prestige, as a prestige symbol, the car. He is looking at the design aspects of the car, whether it has a leather seats or not, and so he is looking at social impact of the car, and that is the saliency of the evaluative criteria, or that is the salient criteria or salient product attribute that he is looking at. And so as I said, from person to person, from product to product, and from situation to situation, it would be different. So at some moment when you are buying a car for yourself, you might be thinking of putting the car in terms of a prestige symbol. But if you are one of those people who hire drivers, or you are running a car company, you are buying a car, the saliency differentiates, because then if you are running a car company, if you are running a taxi company and you are buying a car, it is not that you are looking at prestige, you are looking at how much money it can save. It basically means that how much kilometers per gas unit that it is, or per fuel unit that it is churning out. And so as I said, from situation to situation, so the same person buying two different cars in two different situations, the idea of saliency varies. Saliency of the product attribute varies. Some consumers use ethical considerations as the evaluative criteria, and so this is something new. Now, in nowadays, in today's world, there are people who actually have started using something called ethical consideration ethical consideration as a evaluative criteria. So these are the same people who would next time go into an outlet and ask whether the product is environmental friendly, whether the product is children friendly, whether the product has naturals, is biodegradable, is bio-natural, and so on and so forth. And so this is a new kind of thing which is out there, and sometimes these ethical considerations, whether the product has been tested on animals or not, and so they are not going to buy that product. And so ethical consideration has is now being a very important, or for some people at least, is being an important criteria. And that is why you have BS4 engines, BS5 engines, which do not pollute the air, and talking about catalytic converters in cars, and products which are herbal in nature. So these are all ethical considerations which says that no nature is harmed into it, nothing unethical has been done in maintaining product. And so ethical consideration is another new evaluative criteria which has been added onto the number of criteria which is out there. Now, of course, most important criteria or most important product attributes are what the consumers are actually looking at in doing alternative evaluation. So, consumers actually look at the most important attributes, the attributes which fit their need. So, I have a need, and those product attributes which satisfy my need directly is the one which is called the salient, and that is what the consumer is actually looking at. But at times the consumer becomes crazy. When I am saying crazy, don't take it a literal word. The consumer becomes indifferent. The consumer thinks in a different process altogether. And so, in those cases, when most products are offering similar salient criteria, the consumer actually uses another thumb of law, and he looks for something called trivial attributes. What are trivial attributes? The consumers on occasion treat unimportant attributes as though they are critically important. For example, if I am going to buy a car, sometimes I am so stuck up with how the headlight of the car is made that I decide not to buy a car, and this is a very trivial criteria. Most headlights are made in the same way, and so they will illuminate the road, right? And so it doesn't really worry. Or whether I have a fish fin antenna or a straight antenna onto my car roof for capturing radio signals, or whether I have a leather seat warmers on the car, or some other trivial things. So these things are something which can be added upon. These are accessories which are added upon. But if it doesn't come manufactured by the company itself, sometimes consumers use these as criteria for doing the selection. So which cases are unique to one of the options. So what happens is these trivial criteria are used when one of this evaluated trivial criteria is actually unique to one of the products and none of the products have them, right? And so if the number of brands that you are looking at, the number of products that you are looking at, all of them have equal criteria, but one of them has something which most cars don't have. Good thing to look at. There is Toyota has come up with something called non-man assisted car parking, or automated car parking, right? And so that is what most other car companies have not offered till date. And so this idea of using your mobile phone for parking a car into the parking lot is something which Toyota is offering and no other company is offering right now, because the technology is not there. And so sometimes that is the reason why people buy a Toyota car, and that is what I am talking about in the first case. So the product attribute that you are looking at is trivial, because car assist is something that you are not really looking at, but then you buy it because it is unique, no other products has it. Draws attention away from more important attributes. Sometimes it's used, trivial attributes are used because they draw away your attention from more important attributes. So it's counterintuitive to think that why it should be there. It is there because these trivial criteria actually help you in making decision. Let's say that you have 5 or 7 products and all of them are offering you the benefit in a similar way. All of them are good brands, all of them are likable, but the consumer becomes confused. There are so many options, there are so many brands, and all of them offering the same kind of benefits to you, same kind of product features to you. So what do? What you tend to do is that you find out a trivial criteria and make the decision on that. That is the simplest way to make a decision, and so in those cases you use a trivial attribute. Dilute the effect of important attributes. And so sometimes to dilute the effect of most important attributes, to dilute the engagement with most important attributes, people use something called trivial attributes. Now, trivial attributes might act as a heuristic cue that allows the consumer to forego the more detailed evaluation process and more meaningful attributes. And sometimes these trivial attributes actually signal the fact that a product is good, and so you do not need to go through the whole process of this alternative evaluation and meaningful attribute evaluation. For example, I would buy a Nike shoe. So I will not look at some other attribute, more important attributes like comfort or design or those things. I just decided that Nike is a very good brand name, and so this trivial attribute that Nike has a higher heel ratio or air venting system, which is a very trivial attribute for any shoe, that makes me select the brand Nike, and when I do that, I don't have to do this evaluation of other attributes which Nike is going to offer, which is what which I was actually looking for, because these are the most meaningful attributes, and that way the choice becomes easy. So this focus on trivial attributes are done to make your choice easy. Determinant attributes. What are determinant attributes? As I said, important attributes that have a direct influence on alternate evaluation and final choice. So when the product manufacturers puts these salient attributes, most important attributes into the consumer's retrieval set, what the consumer does is he decides some of those salient attributes on basis of which he is making the final choice and the final purchase, and those are called determinant attributes. These are the ones that direct influences on alternative valuation and the final choice. Quality risk involves functional performance, and so this determinant attribute is dependent on two things: product quality risk and personal risk. So product quality risk is how much risk that the quality of the product is actually going to provide you. So let's assume that we are going into the market and buying frozen foods. Now if you are buying frozen foods, the product quality risk could be in terms of function, in terms of performance, in terms of physical risk, and the consumer will happen. So if you eat that, it will have some physiological risk to you, or performance risk in the sense that it will not be that crispier. The frozen food that you are looking at may not, it may be that if it is you bring it, the chances are that it may not be crispier. It may be not giving you the kind of taste that you are looking at. It could have physical risk and so on. So many other risks are there. And so what consumers actually look at is expiration date. So that is the heuristic cue. The expiration date is the heuristic cue which actually reduces the product quality risk, right? So the determinant risk in cases of a product or let's say a frozen product is expiration date, and if the product is within expiration date, then the product quality risk will be low, and so that expiration date now becomes the determinant attribute. Although the product has all other attributes, salient attributes, example taste, freshness, crispiness, and so on and so forth to offer, but what is the determinant attribute? What is the one attribute on which the product is bought is called the expiration date. So also there is something called personal risk is tied to the negative emotion felt by the consumer when the product fails, and so sometimes it is the personal risk. So basically when a product fails, and so expiration date also prevents this product fails or personal risk. So if you look at expiration date, which is the heuristic cue or which becomes the determinant attribute of you buying a particular frozen food, it reduces both the product quality risk as well as the personal risk, because expiration date guarantees that you are going to get a fresh product and no negative emotion will be evaluated out of it, no negative emotion will be a part of it. Now there are some major determinants that are also used for making this kind of a product selection or evaluative criteria for making a product selection, and one of this most important criteria is price. Price is an important criteria which consumers actually go ahead and use, and this price is the single most in my opinion the single most criteria which are used for doing alternative valuation. So for most consumers and in many buying situations, price is most significant influencer in an alternative evaluation. So the price of a product is the most significant influential agent which defines how you are going to buy a product and when you are going to buy a product. Now price generally are not used in isolation, but one of the mixed of an evaluative criteria. When I actually look at a price of a product, it is not the single price that is quoted on the product that I am looking at. Price being the most important criteria of how you buy a product or how you actually evaluate a product and make the final choice. It is not just the price which is quoted on the product which is important. When I think about price, it is not the price which is quoted there. I think about price of manufacturing, price of how much should I be paying, price that I am going to pay by price that I have paid in terms of the search, and so it is a mix of a number of evaluative criteria, right? So when I'm looking at the price which has been quoted onto a particular product, I'm just not looking at that price. I'm looking at how much effort I have done to get into this price, to pay this price of a particular product. And so the things that the consumer actually, when the consumer buys a product, he has in mind is something called normative price or reference price. Normative reference price is a price that consumer considers fair or just. Now whenever a consumer thinks of buying something and he is looking at the price, what he is looking at is what has gone into making this product. So let's say a car is 6 lakhs. Now when a car is 6 lakhs, that is the reference price, that is the price which the marketer is quoting. When I think of buying a car, when I think about the price of a car, what I look into is how much effort has gone, how much effort the company did to manufacture this car, or how much effort that the company came up with in manufacturing these cars, this particular car, what amount of labor has gone into it, what is the sales price of it, what amount of search has been done, I have done to obtain this particular car, and all those things will go into this particular price that I am looking at. So normative price is the price when I look at all these evaluative criteria in terms of the company effort to get this car, the company investment in this particular car, the kind of effort that I have done, the price I have paid to search for this information in the cars, the price of tax that the company has paid, and so many other things, inclusion of all these criteria to get this reference price. And so reference price is basically it's like confidence interval in statistics. So what is reference price? Reference price is two limits of the price. So when I'm looking for when I'm going to look at a car, I have a lower bound and an upper bound price, and so in between, if the price of the particular car that I'm going to buy, it comes in between the range of upper bound and lower bound prices that I've said. Lower bound is what should be the minimum price of this particular product, and maximum price is what is the maximum price that can happen. So whenever you go to look at a car, you can look at its manufacturing, you can look at how it looks in it's the company, the brand, and so many things, and based on that you think about a minimum and maximum. And if the price of the product falls into the bandwidth or into the middle of that confidence interval that you have created, that is what is called the reference price. So if it falls in between, then the consumer agrees to pay through it. If it falls either too maximum or too minimum, the consumer will not be willing to pay that price, and that is what is called the normative reference price or fair and just price. So fair and just price is a similar thing. So consumer thinks what should be the most just price of this, and that has been done by based on several features or several facts that the consumer considers in terms of it. So for example, let's take a cotton shirt. Now if you're looking at a cotton shirt, what the consumer thinks is what has all gone into making this shirt. So the kind of labor that is gone from wherever it is coming, you include that from the product which is there, how much money it is taking for advertising, and all those things added together, the consumer finds a confidence interval saying this is the maximum that can happen, this is the minimum that can happen. And if the price of the shirt falls in between that range, it is called the fair price, and the consumer agrees to pay with it. But if it goes above or below the limit, the consumer is not willing to pay, and that is not a good thing for any market. And sometimes a dual entitlement principle is also at play in this price perceptions or in the price being used as a evaluative criteria. What is dual entitlement principle is where people expect manufacturers to abide by community standards of cost and profits. And so what while generating this normative price, the dual entitlement principle says that the consumer believes that most manufacturers actually abide with community standards and cost of profits, and if they don't abide, if they give a price which is very higher and very different from most products in this particular criteria, the consumer goes ahead and punishes this particular manufacturer by not buying the product, and so the manufacturer goes without selling the product. The other kind of prices also, for example, there is something called price as an evaluative criteria is also used in many other ways. For example, something called penny a day thing. Now, remember in my introductory lecture, I have said that if I offer to you something in a book or a magazine for 1,000 rupees a year subscription, you are not going to buy it because it seems too big for you to pay 1,000 rupees for a year. But if I break it in terms of penny a day, in terms of month wise, say let's say 84 rupees a month or 86 rupees a month, then you will agree to it because 86 rupees is not too much. And so what you don't realize is when I do this 86 into 12, it will go more than 1,000 rupees. But when I offer this particular thing at 86 rupees per month or 84 rupees per month, but not 1,000 rupees per year, you are more able to buy it, and that is one price trick that has been used. Also, sometimes tricks of prices are used in the market. For example, if I want to suggest that a particular product is of lower value, it is cheap, it is a sale, I can always put the 0.99 and 0.95 thing, and that is why in the market you sometimes see 99 rupees 95 paise, right? That 95 paise which is varying at the end of it, it actually shows that the product is actually cheap, it is on sale, or there is some kind of price matching for the consumer, and that lower reduced price. So that this kind of price tricks are out there which are used by manufacturers for putting the things out there, for putting their products out there, and that is how this price actually works in evaluative criteria. And there is also something called initial price versus actual cost of ownership, and there is also something called initial price. So initial price is the price that you are going to pay, and ownership price is the price actually is the price of a product that you are going to actually have. Now, what is the difference? So initial price is the quoted price of a car, but ownership price is the price that actually you are going to pay by owning a car. So what is the difference? If you buy a car just like a random car in itself is as a product, then it is costing you 6 lakhs, but owning it will require you to pay road taxes, you will require to pay registration charges, will require you to pay insurance charges every year, you have to service it, then all wear and tear cost, petrol cost, and all those things. And so the ownership price is always different, because ownership price will include all those costs together, right? But the price of the car is 6 lakhs, but the ownership price is very high, and that is the difference between that. And so sometimes this ownership price and initial price, the difference between that is also used as an evaluative criteria. At times, brand reputation is also used as an evaluative criteria. So brand name is frequently perceived by consumers to be an indicator of product or service quality. And so at times what happens is some brands just try to put their product, or just try to win over consumers by just putting their brand name. For example, if I say a product is out of Nike, a product is out of Maruti, the brand name of Maruti says that it is sustainable, it is something which is reliable, which is something that you can actually use, has less wear and tear, and so on and so forth. And so sometimes brand name is one of the evaluative criteria or for alternate evaluation that people use, because brand name will really reduce the number of choices that you have to make, or number of comparisons that you make. A high quality position is important. A high quality position is important in establishing brand power, and also called brand equity. Now, if a brand has a high position, it has higher brand power or brand equity, and people flock to it and don't do too much evaluation, alternate evaluation with other brands, stick to it, and so think of using it, or think of liking it, and think of buying that particular thing. So brand quality relationship most likely tied to perceived risk associated with poor purchase decision. And so brand quality relationships are if you take a branded product, that reduces the risk or perceived risk of actually poor purchase. And so people sometimes use brand perceptions or brand reputation as a method for evaluative criteria. And the last that we are going to look at is something called country of origin. And so nowadays in the present days, something country of origin has also a good evaluative criteria. Now, at times a product is basically appreciated because it is coming from a different country, and so the nation from where a particular product or service primarily comes from, that is used in evaluative criteria. For example, autos or cars which is coming out of Germany are very good because German engineering is good. Or if you have carpets and they are coming out of Mexico or somewhere in Argentina, these are very good because they are popular for that. Tea coming out of Japan or India is very good because the country of origin is India, where it's a tea manufacturing place, and so they are the best in teas. Or electronic products which are coming out of the United States are very good, or Britain are very good because they are very good in making or very good in terms of producing this product. And so country of origin is another evaluative criteria which at times consumer uses. Now, country of design and country of manufacturing are also now part of country of origin. And so country of design says that where it has been designed, a particular product has been designed. And so this is very famous with Apple. If you look into Apple, it says designed in the United States, manufactured in China. And so just because it has been designed in the United States, people prefer buying it because they believe that the design itself has a lot to do with it. And so country of manufacture also has a lot of times serves as a very good evaluative criteria. Now, perceived capacity to manufacture the product category is more important than perceived capacity to design or conceive it. And so it is always that the country that can manufacture a product is always given. If the product comes out of manufactured out of US, it is more preferred than if it is designed out of United States, because if it is manufacturing that I am doing, it is designing plus the product is coming out of my country, when this gives me more strength, or this gives me more reliability to buy the product out of it. And so perceived capacity to manufacture is always a good idea for country of origin being used as an evaluative criteria. And the last is effects of design increases with product complexity. And so when the product is complex, it is not where it is coming from that is important. When a product actually gets complex, then design, where the product is designed, gets more importance as a evaluative criteria for finding out or choosing different products. Now, in this particular lecture, what we did was we looked at how or what is alternate evaluation and how alternate evaluation is actually done. What is the process of doing alternate evaluation? And we looked at those criteria that consumer uses, both the tangible and the intangible criteria which the consumer uses to make this alternate evaluation. We also looked at 3 different types of evaluative criteria, and what is saliency of a criteria and what is the discriminant criteria, what is the definition of these 2 things. And then we looked at price, country of origin and brand reputation as measures of evaluative criteria that the consumer uses for making alternate evaluation, and the same alternate evaluation the consumer is doing will actually lead to the final choice and the product purchase. Now, in the next lecture we will look at some of the methods. So, based on these attributes, the consumer now has a group of products from which he has to do the evaluative criteria. So, what is the process of actually doing an evaluative criteria is what we are going to look into the next lecture. We look at the process of how this alternate evaluation, the actually method of doing this alternate evaluation, and then after that in the next lecture we will actually look into what is the role played by outlet or outlet preference into this alternate evaluation, or how does the place of buying a particular product has what influence does it has in terms of alternate evaluation and final choice. So, thank you.